Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sarasota Center of Light. It is such a joy to see each and every one of you here this morning, bringing your love and energy into our sanctuary for our service this morning. And thank you for spending your Sunday morning with us. This morning, I am Reverend Phyllis Lambert. For those of you who don't know me, I will be facilitating the service today. And we have two very, very special guests and dear friends of our center, and Gerald O'Hara and Eric Cargill. They'll be joining us from their home in the UK. And I'll talk a little bit more about Gerald and Eric and how wonderful and special and lovely they are. You'll get to enjoy a spiritual talk by Gerald. And then when we do messages, Gerald and Eric will be giving messages from Spirit. Thank you, Suzanne, our lovely musician who provides such beautiful music for us. And the music is so important in raising the vibration in the sanctuary. So, Suzanne, thank you. It's a very important part of our service. I'd like to ask all of you to get comfortable before we start our service. I'd like to offer an opening prayer. Divine Spirit, impress upon us that we are all one, and that what happens to one happens to all of us. Let us realize the unity of life. May compassion and love fill every heart, and so it is. Yeah. thank you all for sharing in that song. It was also Reverend Dorothy's favorite song. So we always think of her as well when we are able to sing that song. I'd like to ask all of you to turn to the inside of your bulletin to the Declaration of Principles. And these are principles that our own Reverend Tom Newman created for the center, and they fit our philosophy perfectly. So if you like, you can read along with me. We believe in God, the source of all creation. We affirm that metaphysical spirituality is a way of life based upon the teachings and demonstrations of all master teachers. We believe that a sincere application of these teachings and living in accordance with spiritual law leads to true spirituality. We believe in the healing power of God and that all things are possible when done in accordance with divine law. We believe that the highest morality is contained in the Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We believe in personal responsibility to make our own happiness as we co-create with divine law. We believe the purpose of human life is to experience and learn from life lessons in order to progress spiritually. We believe in the immortality of the soul. We believe in communicating with those who have made their transition into the spirit world. We affirm that the doorway to reformation is never closed to anyone here or hereafter. Thank you. We have the Master's Prayer, which is a translation from the Aramaic. And if you like, you can follow along and read with me. O thou, from whom the breath of life comes, who fills all realms of sound, light, and vibration, may your light be experienced in my utmost holiest. Your heavenly domain approaches. Let your will come true in the universe just as on earth. Give us wisdom for our daily need. Detach the fetters of faults that bind us, like we let go the guilt of others. Let us not be lost in superficial things, but let us be free from that which keeps us off our true purpose. From you comes all working will, the lively strength to act, the song that beautifies all and renews itself from age to age. Amen. Thank you all so much for reading along with me. Now we're going to have a musical selection by Suzanne, and Terry is going to be joining her, so it's a special treat this morning.
Yes, a special treat. Good morning. Can you all hear me? Is it okay? Yeah. So it's a George Harrison Day, and there's a reason for it. There's two, actually. It was a request of Gerald, one of our mediums, lovely mediums on the prompter you'll see, to honor George Harrison. His birthday was yesterday. So we're going to do Here Comes the Sun. It's an instrumental, this particular selection in our program. Just enjoy it, and my beloved husband is doing percussion. So all that's asked of you is to just enjoy it. If you want to sing, it's okay.
Oh, wasn't that great? Who doesn't love the Beatles? Especially that song. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Terry. That was great. Thank you. I now have the pleasure of introducing our guest this morning. Gerald O'Hara is going to be giving our spiritual talk this morning. And Gerald is a historian, and he's written several books. And the one that we are most familiar with here in Sarasota Center of Light is he wrote a book about Reverend Dorothy in the Sarasota Center of Light, which at that time was Shrine of the Master. And it's called I Come to the Garden, and it's a wonderful book. So if you're interested in learning more about our history and how it got started and the people who started it, I encourage you to buy the book. He also has some exciting news. He has just published a second book called Psychic Observer and Mediums in America. So that's just coming out fresh off the press there. So I don't know. I'm excited. I can't wait to read it because he's a very, very good writer and very good author. So, and yeah, if you know Gerald, then you expect the writings that he creates because he's so wonderful too. Okay, Gerald. Without further ado, I will give it to you, my dear. No sound. Unmute.
With our friends in Sarasota, so it's just unmuted. Oh, please. Oh, I believe my wonderfully warm introduction got lost in the ether. I blame him. If I get a technical problem, I always pass it on to Eric. And thank you for the warm welcome, and it's lovely to connect with our friends once again in Sarasota and in New Mexico. And if you look around here, we live in the New Mexico consulate in New York. You know, we represent that state here. And what can I say? My theme really for today is how do we empower ourselves positively in the world that we're in at the moment? It sounds trivial, I know, but I had a notification from Google that set me thinking in that Google tracks everything I do through the world, you know. And I was thinking, well, actually, really, in terms of the international global scene, I'm nobody really. So why should I worry about what Google tracks of my activities? And in that sense, we all share one thing in common, in that we're all people in the street, really. We're all men and women, ordinary people in the street. We are the everyman, as they used to say in the 1930s. We are everyman. We're not big politicians. We're not big name stars. We're everybody. And that can sometimes lead us to feeling disempowered in the world. We live in Europe, and we're much closer to the war in Ukraine than are yourselves. However, in the digital world, that's almost irrelevant.
¿Por qué será que no oigo aquí? ¿Por qué no oigo?
What's happening? Anyway, I'll continue and assume you're all avidly listening to what I have to say. We are a lot closer, of course, to the war in Ukraine than are yourself, in the sense of geography. But in the sense of the world, it doesn't really matter where you are in this world. In the United States, you're just as close to the war as we are. And it came to my attention, because it was the anniversary of the war recently, that 145,000 Russians have died in that catastrophe. And of course, we're quite close to Turkey, which is a couple of thousand miles to us to travel. And 50,000 people died there in a matter of a day or two after the quake, after the aftershock. 50,000 people. I mean, the figures are extraordinary, really. And if we allowed that we could feel very disempowered. And of course, there's positively little we can do to ameliorate those situations. But we do have, as spiritually aware people, of course, we do have tools which we can employ in order not to feel so disempowered and powerless, which is really the meaning of disempowered there. And how do we do that? Well, firstly, of course, we can contribute financially to the war charities or to the UNCHR, the United Nations appeals for charitable support for the Turkish and Syrian people who are affected by the disasters. And that's, we can dip into our pockets. We can pray, and we can ask the great spirits and the forces of nature come around and help to alleviate those situations. There isn't really that much we can do in that sense. Some of the occasions that some of the events that have happened in the world in recent months have been man-made, and some have been some are natural occurrences, acts of God, as they say. So we know that God would not will the death of 50,000 people. It's the forces of nature that do that. And we know that there are forces in the world that would bring about war for their own aims. So the Master Jesus had in the Beatitudes, he said, the meek will inherit the earth. And this is another key to how we empower ourselves as spiritual people. Now, when you think about meek, and you think about earth, they're almost the opposites, aren't they? The earth is the whole, the vast planet that we live on and everything in it and everyone in it. The earth is enormous. The meek often sounds a bit like Charles Dickens or Anthony Trollope. Dickens created Uriah Heep. Trollope created Obadiah Slope. And meek sounds a bit creepy. It sounds a bit false, doesn't it? So what was the Master Jesus saying? The meek will inherit the earth, because patently we ain't going to win the lottery. What he meant really was, and actually St. Paul expressed this beautifully in his 1 Corinthians, he said, love vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, seeketh not its own, love does not act unseemly, love rejoices in the right and the righteousness, it is not envious and is kind. In other words, what Master Jesus was saying by meek was conducting oneself with self-respect in a positive way, in a psychologically healthy way, and not behaving in ways that would bring ourselves into discredit with ourselves, so that we have an integrity. And in that way, in that sense of meekness, in that sense, that positive sense of identification with the self, we inherit ourselves. Does that make sense? So the earth that Jesus was referring to was ourselves. It was our consciousness. Eric, as you may know, works in the psychiatric field, and he works with people who are grappling with problems in this kind of field. And the consciousness that we develop as spiritually aware people is the earth which the Lord Jesus was speaking about. We inherit the earth, we inherit ourselves through becoming aware of who we are as spiritual people. In our daily conduct, we acquire the capacity to understand and become ourselves in a spiritual sense. So the meek inherit ourselves. Does that make sense? I hope so. We have, as we understand it, natural law as well, and that I'm sure Uncle Tom will give many a fine lecture on this subject of natural law. And we understand by natural law this kind of positive, creative, and spiritual positive affirmations and creative visualizations. In other words, with situations in the world such as Ukraine and Turkey and Syria, we can make affirmations that the help and the assistance and the forces of peace come around and uplift and aid the people who are in need. likewise, in our own spiritual lives, we can use the tools of creative visualization so that those things that we need materially, spiritually, come into play. And of course, as I've just mentioned, if you want to win the lottery, well, you won't. That's almost certainly not going to happen. But if you ask in a general sense for the opportunities for creative, spiritual, and material conditions to come around you, you leave open the doors for the forces of spirit to come and assist in you on your life's path. And of course, we're spiritual people, and we know that those spiritual forces are there waiting to be engaged. And I have in mind that famous 19th century painting by Holman Hunt, the watcher at the gate, and Jesus is knocking at the door of consciousness, waiting to be admitted by ourselves. It's not a king that comes to kick in the door of consciousness. He waits to be admitted. In that way, the meek ourselves admit the Master Jesus and his positive teachings, because things like the Sermon on the Mount are actually instructions on how to live in this world, how to develop that spiritual consciousness, and how to live according to right. It's a practical essay in the brotherhood of man, in effect. There are people in this world who do evil things, I'm afraid. And we know, as Master Jesus said on the cross, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. In other words, if they did know what they were doing, they wouldn't do it. If they could understand the consequences of their actions, both on the world which they're affecting and on themselves, ultimately, in the creation of consciousness, they would behave differently. Truth is an absolute in that sense, in the sense that, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. The truth is different from that, they know not what they do. In short, then, folks, what I wanted to talk about today was how we, as every man in the street, conduct ourselves on a daily basis when we are confronted by a world that terrible things happen in. We can't change the world, but we can change ourselves, and we can change the community in which we live and in which we participate. In doing so, we change ourselves. Eric and I, in fact, we had the pleasure of seeing Henry V the other day. And the wonderful thing about Shakespeare is that whilst we love the history plays that Shakespeare did, he always has every man from the street somewhere in every play. There's always the voice of the common, of the unheard, of the oppressed sometimes. And it's the voice of landladies, or it's the voice of foot soldiers, or of valets, or of heralds, ordinary people whose existence is bypassed by the historians. And it's those people who are given voice sometimes. What we see in Shakespeare was that even though they are the nobodies of the world, nevertheless their voice often represents something universal, which they are expressing, and in doing so, we find a voice through them. I'm going to conclude this. So, as I was saying at the beginning of this talk, I'm being tracked by Google. I'm not sure if I'm fair or not, really. Some people get very offended by that. I'm not sure that it matters, because I'm not an international figure in that sense. But when it comes to the disasters of the world, I know through the spiritual tools that we've developed through the Shrine of the Master, the Sarasota Center of Light, and through the teachings, that we can alter our behavior. We can bring into our lives the forces of the universe, which are waiting there to help us at every stage. And we can feel empowered because we are aware, we have changed our consciousness. We do understand the true meaning of being meek is actually self-respect and treating others with the same self-respect. And in that way, we inherit the earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald. That was so poignant in so many ways. We talked about spirit guides and how important they are in our lives. And I'll talk about it a little bit later, but Reverend Tom's going to be teaching a class on getting to know your spirit guides. So thank you so much for that. We now have an opportunity to share our love by way of an offering. To our friends on Zoom, we offer a safe and secure way to give by texting the word Sunday, which is on the screen, and the phone number. Simply follow the prompts. Whatever form your donation is in, I ask you to place it in your hand and hold it over your heart. With loving intention, I invite you to repeat after me the offering affirmation. The law of increase governs my life through giving. All that is mine comes to me through the operation of divine love and law. Infinite Spirit, we ask that a blessing be placed upon these gifts and the givers, knowing that abundance will return to them in many ways. And so it is. Thank you, girls. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I have a few announcements. Next Sunday, which is March the 5th, our returning guest will be Julianne Harper. She is also from the UK, and she is a medium and a teacher, and I will talk a little bit more about her next week. We have a save the date. Reverend Tom Newman will be visiting us in March, and he will be doing services March 12th and March 18th. And he also will be giving the talk and the messages at those two services. And Tom is going to be conducting two workshops. One on March 11th, which is Getting to Know Your Spirit Guides, and that will be in Davis Hall from 2 to 4:30. And the second class is going to be So You Want to Talk with Spirit, and that will be on March 18th at the same time, and more details will follow. Just a little bit about Reverend Tom. He grew up in this church. He was mentored by Reverend Dorothy. He was senior pastor here for 17 years until he retired to Santa Fe in 2013. he didn't really retire. He's still conducting classes and bringing mediums in from all over the world. So he's still very busy, but we can't wait to see Reverend Tom back in the sanctuary. The Hands of Light are having a meeting after our Sunday service this morning, and we're always looking for volunteers. So if you want to have fun planning events and planning coffee hours, please consider volunteering. And if you're just interested to get some information, take a few minutes if you can and join us over in Davis Hall, which is the building right behind us. And every Wednesday evening at 7:30 is our healing service, which is held for now on Zoom only. And in the near future, we will be offering in-person healing on Wednesday nights here in the sanctuary. If you would like to request a healing for yourself or for someone, a loved one or a pet, it doesn't matter, for travel protection, whatever it may be, you can request a healing by sending it to skullhealing@gmail.com, and the request will be given to the healers, and it will also be placed in our healing bowl, which I don't know if all of you can see it, but it's here in the sanctuary. It's very powerful. Remote healing is very powerful, and it's, I would say, just as powerful as having someone here working over you. So don't hesitate to request a healing. Every Sunday morning, speaking of healing, between 10:30 and 10:55, our healers are in the Flexor Healing Chapel, which is also behind the sanctuary. For anyone who would like a healing, please stop in before service. The healers there would love to see you. We have our ongoing raffle for the Crystal Bowl that Robert Austin donated to the center as a fundraiser. You can buy a raffle ticket, one for $5 or three for $10. And if you'd like to purchase tickets, they're available today after the service. The drawing will be Easter Sunday. So if you're interested in that. Any other events that are coming up will be on our website, and I encourage you to go there and visit. If you have any questions, you can always call the office or contact one of us. Okay, well, thank you for bearing with me on the announcements, and and now we get to hear another favorite song before we go into messages from Spirit. So, Suzanne.
There's only one thing we need. All you need is love.